Welcome back to the Ruck Shop's YouTube channel. In today's video we're going to be installing the TRS GY6 Skinny Mount on this 49cc Ruckus. The Ruckus we have in front of us is a modified Honda Ruckus. We are going to be removing the 49cc platform, putting in the GY6 Skinny Mount, and going over the installation process of this. We're going to go ahead and get started by removing parts like the seat frame to get that out of the way to make it easier for the disassembly. And then after that we're going to remove the motor mount bolts from the behind the frame caps, and then the shock arm, unplug all the wiring for the harness, and wheel the whole engine assembly back. So for this one there's an NCY seat frame. What we're going to do is just remove the 6 M8 bolts out of there, and that will take the seat frame off the bike itself. So next thing you're going to want to do is remove the harness from all the little clamps that you see on here. There's these little adjustable rings, and you're going to loosen up all those so that the harness is free and loose, and then start unplugging them from the factory carburetor that remove the ground from the side of the motor here. There's going to be also the stator plugs over here. You're going to want to remove the fuel line, the throttle cable, the brake cable, and go through and remove any of the clips that are still attached to the motor to the main harness here. Next thing I'm going to do is remove the shock arm bolt here, and this will free up the shock arm since I have all of the cables already out of the way. And then after that I will hit the 2 frame bolts on the side, and essentially that will drop the motor down. Now one thing to note is once you remove this bolt, the engine's going to drop. Same thing with the other 2 frame bolts. So you're going to want something underneath your motor to keep it in place. I'm grabbing the head of the motor so that it can lift up a little bit, take some pressure off, and then also just to keep the motor from dropping down. And like that, the motor is now free from the engine. I'm going to go ahead and wheel it back out of the way. Okay, you see here the motor is now off. Bolts are removed from the bushings. What I'm going to do next is remove the 4 frame bolts here that hold the front and rear frame together. Now I have this braced and then strapped down the front to keep this level. Note that when you start loosening up these frame bolts, the frame is going to want to dip down, so you're going to want to make sure you keep a hand on that. And then essentially for this mount to fit, it bolts up like that. So you will want to grind off this tab. There's one at the top and bottom right there. And then for the T-bracket up front, you're going to grind down this tab and this tab right here, and that will allow you to run the bracket. Now also these 6mm holes are going to get opened up to 10mm, so that's something else to note. We're going to bring the frame over to the fab shop, have Bert knock this out, and then when it's all set and done we'll bring it back and go ahead and start putting it all back together. So while the frame is at the fab shop, just show you what you get in the kit here. So you're going to get the 6061 billet mount. It's going to have the spacer on it, the new frame bolt. You'll have the bag of hardware. You'll have the top bracket for the T-bracket, the stretch bar, the shock arm bolt, the T-bracket for the front, and then the shock arm. So you can see there is a difference between this and the fatty setup with having no offset in the shock arm, and then the same thing with the motor mount itself. Now that the frame is back, we just temporarily put some wrap on here for the area that was ground down. We will repowder coat this after the video. What you can do is start by putting the T-bracket bolt in. You're going to leave everything loosely for now, then you'll go back, Loctite it, and secure it. So the two holes up top here that you opened up to M10, you're going to go ahead and take this bracket and place the bolts through, like so. On the bottom half, you're going to put 2 of the supplied washers and 2 of the supplied nylock nuts. Again, I'm going to leave it loose for the time being, then I'll go back after it's all fitted on and put red Loctite and tighten it up. For the bottom side, you're going to take this T-bracket with the short side. When I mean short side, the closest side to the hole here, facing towards the right side of the bike. Slide that through. Put a washer. And then a nylock. Now that you have that bracket in, we're going to move on over to the main motor mount piece and go from there. Okay, so now with the top pieces, like this clamp and the other half circle clamp, with those removed, you're now going to take the 4-part section and place it on this side of the mount, and then the 2-part portion where the C-clamp goes will be on the opposite side. So I'll go ahead and just fasten this in real quick and I'll get a better angle for you. Okay, so you have a better perspective here. You can see, I like to call this the dog bone mount, is bolted on right here, and then where the C-clamp goes will be right here on the frame. Now I am leaving this loose because you don't want to tighten it up. This will pivot back when you go to put the motor on. Next I'm going to put the C-clamp in, and again I'm doing this all loosely, and I will go back and put Loctite on these items. Now you'll see when you put the shock arm on, you want to have some room, because the shock arm tab is going to go over the same bar here and right next to this. And sometimes what you may notice is if these factory welds are a little bit thick, or the powder is a little thick, it may put some pressure on it and you'll have to potentially grind down the welds. Or you could open up the C-clamp here a little bit. You don't want to go too much where you can start to hurt the integrity of the product or the frame. So next up, you're going to take your billet shock arm here. You have your C-clamp that you remove from the bottom of this that comes assembled on there. This you're going to leave loose, and you'll see why in a minute. You're going to slide it under, tilt that at a little bit of an angle, and it's going to slide right in place like so. Now to temporarily secure this, you're going to use the provided shock bolt. You go ahead and push it through and tighten it up, and that's going to keep now the shock arm in place. So now you have the shock arm mounted. You're going to go ahead and remove the bolts that are at the end of it. And then I'm going to go ahead and get the motor and start to roll this in place. What you're going to do is bring it in so that the two motor mount tabs line up in between the bracket here, and then you'll be able to slide the engine bolt through. Give you a little bit closer look. That's the mount installed. You have the spacer right here, so it's going to go on the starter side here, which the starter's right there. You're going to have the bolt, washer, spacer, mount. It'll come through, and then you're going to put the stretch bar on the other side. So something that's going to help is you can push this bolt back a little bit so it's still in the bushing here, and then the stretch bar is going to go across to the T bracket. Once you do that, then you will go ahead and mount your shock up to the shock arm. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing next. Okay, so now that the stretch bar is installed loosely, we're going to go ahead and put the shock on there. In this case, it's going to be the NCY Lowboy shock. The kit comes with the bottom bolt for the shock, which will go over here. Typically you're going to cut this hose, shorten that up. So what I'll do is slide this through. Okay, so now we have the shock arm. See, we have a spacer on each side to center it. One thing you may have to do, depending on the shock you're using, is you can grind the inside of the bushing of the shock. So on each side you might notice a little bit of a bushing sticking out. You can grind that down. This will allow for the spacers to sit evenly against the shock there. And then at the bottom, like we've mentioned in our tips and tricks video, you can just grind the inside of this arm here, and then that will allow for the shock to sit at the right angle. You can see here, shock is perfectly straight. The wheel is straight with the center of the frame. This is your standard GY6 skinny wheel. So this is what you'd be running with something similar, like a mount like this. And that is the TRS billet skinny mount for the GY6 150cc scooter. Now I'm going to go ahead and go through all of this, tighten it back or loosen it up, put Loctite on it and tighten it up. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe.